Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report, reporting to you from Trumpism, the new America. The new century has finally begun, and it's being masterminded by Donald Trump. Well, guess what? We're in America. We're checking out what's happening in America, what's really happening in America. How did everyone get us so wrong? How did everyone get us so right? Stacey.
Max, you have a bit of a flashback. We're moving on. We've moved on to new episodes,
We're keeping it local, though, aren't we?
We're keeping it local. We're talking about the local situation because Trump, you are correct, Trump did win the election. That happened a few weeks ago. So we've moved on a little bit, but Trump...
I still see Matt Taibbi tweeting about it. It must be, something must be going on out there.
But we are talking about de-globalization. This is something we brought up on our show years ago, but it's actually starting to take effect. We're actually starting to see the political and geopolitical consequences of deglobalization. That's why we're here at the Piedmont Biofuels plant. We have local farming here. We have local breweries. We have all sorts of local companies. But in the second half, you continue your interview with Lyle Estill, and he mentioned McIntyre Books, which is a local little bookstore. There's still bookstores that exist in the world. One locally exists here in Pittsburgh. We were in it. And I thought it is, even in a localized economy, this city, Pittsburgh, is famous for their local economy. I found this bottle of lavatory mist, Vladimir Putin. You get it? It says, make your problems disappear. So any of your bathroom problems. And on the back it says, there's that topless photo of Putin on a horse. And it says, wrestle the bears. I cover your filthy secrets. I bring odor to its knees. A little potion goes a long way. So we've used a lot of it here because it is quite stinky here as they make these biofuels.
Well, I think the point you're making there is that there's still the geopolitical globalized memes that go on there. Probably the meme of the century has been the Putin's Russia meme that has gotten everyone in a Twitter war based on how remarkable they've been able to transform that economy. But you see it on the local level here in a local bookshop in the center of a localized economy, the influences of the propaganda war that's going on now geopolitically in the outside world.
Geopolitics is like globalization. So it's I thought it was quite interesting to see it down on this local level in that local bookstore after he had mentioned
I'm doing my part down on the farm here. I think a bird actually pooped on my waistcoat and tie. So I'm proudly wearing bird poop on my vestments today as my homage to the farm life. I feel like it's an episode of Green Acres.
So we're here in Pittsburgh, local economy, but we're going to continue to talk about the global economy because the global economy is, and globalization is part of this headline, the reaction against globalization, the reaction against the concentration of wealth brought on by globalization, by financialization, is found in this headline from the United Kingdom. Over there where it's all cold and rainy, not so sunny and warm. And the headline reads from Bloomberg, UK plans executive pay curbs to restore faith in capitalism. The UK will outline plans for a crackdown on business executive salaries and bonuses as Prime Minister Theresa May's government seeks to narrow the wage gap between average workers and their bosses. So government diktat is having to come down in order to squeeze that gap because these politicians are worried about their own careers.
Well, I mean, it's remarkable that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, fails to address the problem of lawlessness, which is at the heart of the crisis in capitalism. It's not about executives at the top making lots of money. It's about systemic racketeering being coordinated amongst banks, rating agencies, the big four accounting firms, and government officials in a huge display of kakistocracy and kleptocracy. But she refuses to make that point because that might anger her handlers.
You know, we're talking about a systemic thing here. This is why we're here at this localism, local economy, this drive towards localization rather than globalization. And she's just, putting her finger, her thumb inside a dam that is bursting. It's a little bit too late. It's systemic. It's beyond that. All they can do with the system they have of globalized, financialized world of trade deals, favoring certain people, favoring certain corporations, favoring connected corporations, all they could do is plead with these executives to please, because this isn't enforceable anyway. It's like, just please do something. Please don't be so greedy. Please pay your workers. You have a little bit more. Please take less of it. That's all they have. But it's only a stopgap measure because the fact is, it's the system.
Well, it's abhorrent, actually, because you've got a group of entrenched oligopolists who are ripping off the system blind and causing poverty to skyrocket in the UK. And the response of government is to pass the hat amongst the oligarchs and the plutocrats and say, oh, we're collecting for the poor people you made poor. And the plutocrats will say, oh yes, here's a penny for the guy. You know, here's a stipend. Here's a drabloon, or whatever they used to call these. You know, the old currency of yesteryear. You know, it's why not just obey the law for one thing? You know, get started.
So the proposals will seek to set up staff scrutiny committees, force firms to publish pay ratios between chief executive officers and average employees, and give shareholders binding veto powers on executive pay, UK Work and Pensions Secretary Damien Gray said on Sunday. And this shareholder thing is quite interesting because this has been part of the globalization and deglobalization and financialization story, is that shareholders have never, like they theoretically have some powers now to veto CEO pay, but they never ever do that because it tends to be, you know, the biggest shareholders tend to be the likes of them, of the CEOs. They're friends with them, or they're huge pension funds, and they are like wined and dined by those same CEOs. So I don't see that ever. Maybe, you know, an individual shareholder with 5 shares might be like, down with your pay. I don't want you to have big pay. But that's not going to do anything compared to the large mutual funds and pension funds that own this share.
Yeah, the nature of the markets has changed over the past 30, 40 years. Back in the 60s and 70s, the individual investor was key in these markets. Firms like Merrill Lynch and their thundering herd of tens of thousands of stockbrokers with new products like cash management account, they would get a lot more of an individual participation. But then you had the transformation of a more institutionalized market. Mutual funds became bigger. And so you have passive investors and index funds and exchange-traded funds. None of those are really backed by shareholders as such. They're derivatives. So a company like BlackRock, which is the biggest money manager in the world, I think, they control over $1 trillion through their sponsorship of exchange-traded funds and other products. They don't have any qualms about anything that a normal shareholder would have. So the shareholder as a democratic exercise is toast.
Anyway, I think this is their let them eat cake sort of moment, this sort of moment where Marie Antoinette realized that the peasants were angry at the system that it was, and she genuinely felt scared, Marie Antoinette, and genuinely felt like, well, isn't there a simple solution? Why not just give them brioche? Just give them brioche. And here Theresa May is like, well, surely there's just a simple solution. There's always a simple solution. Why not just pay yourself less than you do, you know, the ratio, reduce the ratio a little bit? I think this is that sort of moment.
Well, I mean, we've been waiting for this Marie Antoinette moment now for a few years. There's been some good contenders. You had the Arab Spring, seemed awfully potent for a while before they got a new dictator, thanks to America. Black Lives Matter, certainly a pretty potent force out there on the street. The Occupy Wall Street movement was, I thought, you know, that Marie Antoinette moment. They've all been washed over with cash.
No, the Marie Antoinette moment comes from the top. It doesn't come from the bottom. Marie Antoinette was aristocracy. She was the queen. This is from the bottom has always been their angry. It started with the Arab Spring. It started with the Indignados. It started with these sort of Occupy Wall Street. They've been angry, and that's been bubbling up. Just like the peasants in France were angry for many years, and then it started bubbling up until they lost any fear of the elite. And Marie Antoinette realized that they were right at her gate, and she saw that they were not afraid of her, the Sun King, the divine rights of kings. They were no longer afraid of that. People no longer are afraid of the divine right of, you know, our electoral college and presidential system here. And they said no, basta to Hillary Clinton, for example, and voted for a vulgar barbarian at the political gates.
A vandal, a Goth.
Exactly.
Well, you know, economies are vulnerable to events, and when they're so highly leveraged and so disproportionately distributing of wealth. And to get back to the French Revolution, I believe the year before, 2 years before, there was a major volcanic eruption
Yes.
in Iceland, I think,
Yes,
which
yes.
caused wheat crops to fail. which drove the price of bread higher in countries like France to the point where people said, you know what, we've got nothing to lose, let's just overthrow this queen.
So going back to
king.
banks, however, so she's asking executives to please, please don't pay yourself so much. Don't make it so difficult because my head's going to go first. And well, it's actually harder and harder because of Trump, because this is a headline that goes with that. Bank stocks have gained $300 billion in 25 days thanks to Trump. So banks and insurers jumped by 12% in the 3 weeks following Trump's election, becoming president-elect. The catalyst is Trump, whose election, according to Macquarie Group analyst David Conrad, will usher in a new world order for the industry, raising trading, dismantling regulation, and boosting rates, with investors gripped by what Evercore ISI's Glenn Shore called a return of, quote, animal spirits. Skeptics wonder who's left to buy.
Right, the animal spirits, of course, the Keynesian term. You rely on this to get the juices running and people taking risk again.
Yeah.
And banks are willing to lend money again. Now, if that's true, then they're going to lend a lot.
Why should they lend money when there's risk-free? Their share price has gone up 12%.
Because of animal spirits, because of greed, because your neighbor's getting richer and you want to get even richer. But if they start lending money again, of course, that would cause inflation, because the only thing that's kept rates this low has been not lending. So if they're going to start this animal spirit cycle again, then interest rates are going to go a lot higher. They're banking on interest rates going a lot higher, but that means the property bubble is going to bust.
Well, going back to this Marie Antoinette deglobalization and localization story, I told you that the bottom 99.9% are angry, the elites are very happy, and this story is suggesting that they have bumper Christmas bonuses coming. Goldman Sachs partners themselves, who hated Trump, they campaigned against him, they told the population that he was a disaster. Well, they themselves are going to collect $800 million extra just for Christmas bonuses, just the partners at Goldman Sachs, thanks to their share price soaring. So I'm saying, here's Theresa May, very worried, pleading with bankers and executives to please not pay yourself so much. They're like, wow, our share price went up, by $300 billion worth, thanks to the angry deglobalization peasants out there, which is only going to infuriate them even more, I'm thinking.
All right, well, you called it. You called it. This is the Marie Antoinette moment. Theresa May, this beginning of the global insurrection against banker occupation, starts in earnest. Now, in the second half, we have a very interesting guest, don't we?
We continue talking about this localization because this is Pittsburgh, North Carolina. It's the heart of small localization. Small is possible, they say. It's a famous book written by your guest. And this is Pittsburgh, North Carolina.
All right, let's get small in the second half. Don't go away.
You know what you will never, ever, ever see on American mainstream media?
You won't hear it anywhere else.
This story was almost completely left out of the Western mainstream press.
You won't see it anywhere else.
This is not talked about on CNN because it's not allowed.
You won't see it anywhere else.
Things you'll hear on Crosstalk.
Yoweri Museveni has been Ugandan president for 30 years. He hasn't always been the perfect democratic leader.
Why is Museveni untouchable? Because he has the protection of the United States government.
Where the oil wells are, the American troops are there, and the government in power. It doesn't matter whether that person is Museveni killing his own people is not democratic, that he is a friend.
His brilliant idea was to lock his people away in a concentration camp to protect them from rebels.
No food, no hydration, no medical health care, lack of sanitation, sexual violence from the soldiers who were meant to protect them. That's why this was a brilliant genocide, a silent genocide, perfect crime.
Did the international community reject him? In 2016, Museveni was re-elected as Uganda's president.
ఇట్లా గేట్ పెట్టుకొని ఉంది. గేటు డోరు దగ్గరికి లా ఉంది. అయిపోయింది తలుపు పెట్టేసుకున్నాం అంటే లేదు తీయనంటే తీసేసుకున్నాం. ఆ మందు డబ్బా చేతులు ఉంది ఎందుకు ఇట్లా చెప్పక మా మరిది వాళ్ళు ఇట్లా వీళ్ళందరూ ఇక్కడనే ఉంటే మొత్తుకోగానే వచ్చేసిండు.
At the national level in the last 20 years, 2.9 lakh farmers have committed suicide.
BT cotton has been promoted as something which actually solves the problems of the Indian farmers. Something which comes as is thrust upon the farmers as a solution starts creating more problems.
Monsanto has created monopolistic control over the cotton seed market in India. Only BT cotton is available. Normal cotton seed is largely unavailable to Indian farmers.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time to return to Lyle Estel of Biofuels Co-op here in historic Pittsboro, North Carolina. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Max.
All righty, so let's talk about this concept of globalization versus localism. And Pittsboro is a hotbed of this activity. Why? Why is it possible here? Why is small possible? Or how is small as possible? Why? Why? Tell us why.
Oh, gosh. I think the nice thing about Pittsboro is that it's small enough to get your head around. We have about 3,000 people here, and so you really can make enough fuel to power 3,000
Do you agree
folks.
with this concept that the world has hit the brakes in terms of globalization and that there is now a trend back toward a localization? Do you think that's true in a more of a general sense?
Well, I think without a doubt. I think the idea of resilience in a local community is becoming fashionable at last. I think that a dependency on the fickle whims of a global economy hasn't necessarily served everybody very well.
Now, you've got about satellite operations all feeding into one kind of the hub here.
Yes.
And so can you just describe that a little bit? Because you've got a whole village, I guess you could say, operating.
I would call it an eco-industrial park, and we aggregate fats, oils, and greases from about 50 miles around Pittsboro. And we also make electricity from the sun that falls on our solar panels, and we also grow food, which we distribute out to local restaurants and at farmers markets and so on.
Yeah, there's a lot of local restaurants now using local food.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
all part of
Sure.
it. And approximately how many jobs are you creating here?
Oh boy, the jobs at the plant in Pittsboro have risen and fallen over the years. I would say today there's probably about 50 people that are gainfully employed here. It's probably been higher than that in the past. It ebbs and flows. Sometimes we will hit a winner. Eastern Carolina Organics, we watch them go from 0 to $3 million a year worth of produce distribution. They moved to Durham.
Okay, so you're like an incubator for this type of thing.
In a way, we have incubated projects. Yep, not all of them successes. So we've had some failures as well.
Right, that's the typical of an incubator, like a Silicon
totally
Valley incubator for high-tech startups. You know, they have one winner out of a 50 or 60.
Right.
So that's not inconsistent with this idea that people would incubate in this type of environment and then move on.
Totally right.
And your turnover in the biofuels, you do 1 million gallons a year?
Right.
Okay, so that's pretty hefty business. Now, you also created a currency in Pittsboro called the Plenty.
Right.
Tell us about that.
So the Plenty is a local currency that is just essentially backed by the same thing that Uncle Sam's dollars are backed by, and that is trust. So in this little town, you can buy your groceries or your fuel or your booze in Plenties. The last time I was given a Plenty in change was last week over at the Fair Game Distillery. So I handed them $20 to get my glass of beer, and they handed me a Plenty as change.
So basically, you're printing up paper money, and it's one-for-one conversion with dollars.
That's correct.
And so the idea is to keep it here in the community. People use the Plenty here in the community. You know, historically, this is the way paper money has evolved. Everyone had their own paper money. In the United States, there were many, many versions of paper money.
That's exactly right.
And then you had the central banking system, the federal banking system, and now it seems like there's, again, the pendulum is swinging back towards something that has already been prevalent. In America, of course, is a country of bootstrapping, frontiersmen, making their way, independent, and, you know, to use your word, resilient I would think this is the most American thing in the world.
Okay, very good. I'll accept that. I think the trick is, the reason for the local currency is they don't accept them in China.
Yeah.
It's basically plugging leaks in our local economy. So if you think about, say, our independent bookstore, McIntyre's, they, when you spend $1 at McIntyre's, they then use part of that dollar to pay for their local bookkeeper, and then the bookkeeper goes out to lunch at the local restaurant, and you can measure the amount of times that dollar goes around town before it leaves.
But the multiplicity of money.
Absolutely, it's a multiplier. That's right.
Right,
So
it's a multiplier, and it's circulating in the economy, and it does the good is aggregated geometrically.
That's right.
Right?
That's exactly it. So when you spend that dollar far away at Amazon, it leaves town once and never to be seen or heard from again. And so that's the whole concept behind the local currency.
Right. So there are banks that participate.
Capital Bank downtown will exchange plenties for Federal Reserve notes. So if you were on your way to the beach where you can't spend plenties, then you can go down and cash your plenties in, turn them into U.S. dollars. And
okay, so who told them, the bank, was that a tough sell to get them involved, or are they just happy to encourage the community participation? Or?
It's interesting. It was not. I wrote about them when they were locally owned in Small as Possible, which is my second book, and it's a book about local economy.
Oh, you're the author of that book?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned the book. I didn't know. I just thought it was a famous book. I didn't know you wrote the book.
Well,
It was your second book. What was your first book?
The first book was called Biodiesel Power: The Passion, Politics, and People of the Next Renewable Fuel.
Right.
So I have 5 books in print.
Oh, right.
And Small as Possible was the one about local economy. It was my big book.
Who was that Indian woman who wrote Small is Beautiful?
Okay,
Erin
so that
Roy.
was Schumacher. He was the economist for the coal company in England, and E.F. Schumacher wrote Small is Beautiful, and Small as Possible is definitely coming from the E.F. Schumacher tradition.
And of course, Steve Martin released an album called Let's Get Small.
Yeah,
back
that's
in the
different.
1970s.
Yeah, that's different.
But small is a theme, though, going forward.
It is. It's trying to, Schumacher's...
Small can be big, is what we're saying.
Well, Schumacher's cut line was economics as if people mattered. And I think the important thing is scale. We lose our way with scale very, very easily.
Okay, meaning like if you are going to make an assembly line of cars and you make a gazillion cars, a lot of them end up in a landfill, and the scale is incredible, but there's no accounting for the environmental cost.
Well, there's that. Or if you're making fuel, if you can make a gallon, why don't you make 100? If you can make 100, why don't you make 1 million? If you can make 1 million, why don't you put together a 100 million gallon biodiesel plant? In the Piedmont view of the world, the next 100 million gallons of fuel should not come from a 100 million gallon plant in the harbor, but rather from 100 little guys. Put one on the edge of town, power it from waste from that community, and that's the kind of scale that we can comprehend.
When you see environmental disasters, like I'm thinking the Deepwater Horizon disaster.
Yeah.
Does that affect the market at all? Do you see people responding to that?
Absolutely. When Deepwater Horizon was belching into the Gulf, our phone was ringing off the hook here at Piedmont Biofuels. People were becoming members and jumping in as fast as they could. Coming home to images of dead pelicans on the evening news is, not a good thing for the oil business.
So when you become a member here, what does that mean exactly?
It allows you to buy biodiesel and run your car or your truck or your family on.
Right, so there's actually a pump here we looked at. Now, finally, not finally, but necessarily, but Trump won not only North Carolina, but many of the Rust Belt states that Hillary was expected to win. What do you think the left needs to do to address the economy outside of the creative and high-tech coastal areas of the country?
Oh, boy. I think the left needs to be authentic. I think that you need to put forward candidates that are real and authentic. And I think that in today's economy, we're starved for content. We're also starved, that's your business. And we're also starved for authenticity. And people want a genuine experience. So they want to know that the rum that they're drinking was made from sorghum grass that came from Silk Hope. They want to know that it was crushed locally and turned into rum here at Fair Game Beverage Company. They want to know that the fat was collected from the fryer at their favorite restaurant and turned into fuel down here in Pittsburgh. They want to come on tour. They want to see where things are made. And actually, what we really want is we want a country that is making things again.
How do we prevent ourselves from becoming France in all this authenticity? Isn't that a risk? That suddenly we care about food and care about the environment and have the terroir and all vertically integrated. I mean, we'd all be French, and that would be a disaster, right? Because the French are, never mind, I'll move on. Let's, you talk about authenticity for a second there. It's interesting, we mentioned Trump and authenticity because, and what sprung to mind was the difference between Farmville, which is a virtual game, and a farm. So even though you go to a farm and a cow may be pooping in the field, but it's authentic. So here you have Trump, who's, verbally pooping on people. But the response was not, oh, my God, that's disgusting, but that's so real. And they voted for that.
It's true. It's true. We try to provide an authentic experience in the different endeavors that we participate in here at the plant.
Right. So is there an interesting dynamic between the different pieces of the community here? In other words, is there?
Absolutely. I mean, you put 12 businesses together on the same patch of dirt and let the fun begin.
Really?
You parked your truck on my collards, and I was in the way when you needed to take a load, and you were using the forklift, and who left the pipe wrench.
So people are still people. Even though they're being biocentrically minded, they're still humans.
Oh my gosh. At Piedmont Biofuels, we've often said that if this was just BTUs, it would be easy, but there are people involved.
BTU, British Thermal Unit. So it's just, if it was just energy, that would be one thing.
If we were just moving BTUs around, there'd be no complaints and no struggle whatsoever.
Right.
But we've got humans with different personalities and...
Have you thought about augmenting the income of this place by maybe producing a reality TV show?
This would make a great reality TV show, no question. I keep waiting for a big star like you to come down the lane and make it happen.
Absolutely.
And I usually spend most days sitting by my phone waiting for it to ring.
Waiting for Hollywood to call.
That's right.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, we only got about 30 seconds left. I'm just trying to think now, the future, the next couple of years, what do you see is the future here?
Well, Pittsburgh is growing, and so I think we're going to grow with it. We've got a meadery moving in. We've got a hard apple cider place. We're probably going to become more
What was the first one, or what?
A meadery, where they make mead.
A meadery?
Yep.
Mead.
Mead.
What is mead?
Mead is a wine that's made from honey, and it's going to be made on site.
They drink that in England, don't they?
That's
Beer
correct.
made of mead?
It's a wine made of mead, but yeah, a little higher alcohol content than beer.
I thought that was, didn't that cause the bubonic plague or something? Wasn't that part of the cause of the plague? Mead?
No.
That's not
the
a good
bubonic
PR,
plague
is it?
was spread by fleas. Very different.
Okay.
Mead, not fleas. So the trick is we've got a meadery, we've got a hard cider operation that's coming online next month. So I think we're probably going to become a bit of a beverage district.
So to sum it up, booze is big.
What we do here is we move liquids around. I think that's why God created me.
Lots of liquids. All right. Lyle Estel, thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Okay, thanks for having me.
That's going to do it.
You're welcome.
For this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert, I want to thank our guest, Lyle Estel of the Biofuels Co-op here in historic Pittsburgh. If you want to find us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.